guys ready then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Welcome to the Gathering Greenhouse, a podcast to help us grow together. I'm Steve. This is my sign for you to share your name. Okay, there's John over there. And
what
Matt,
if I did that the whole time?
Matt, did you switch to John really fast?
I did not.
Uh-oh.
Wait,
John doesn't get in there.
Is your angle different today, John?
I don't know.
But he's also in the dark a little bit. I'm curious. I'm curious how the shot's going to come out.
I'm gonna turn the light on.
Start the whole thing over.
Speaking of procrastination,
Oops.
All right, let's start over.
is that going to make it better there? Oh, okay. I thought you were just turning on the little lamp there. Did you get that? No. Did you get the wide shot for that?
Go.
Keep going. Okay.
Here we're back.
This is a disaster.
I wave call it. The
thing is, it's not
like
our
it
fault.
when this stuff happens.
I think we're
It's
just
funny.
off our rhythm because it's way later. In the
When
day.
you say we, though, I don't. Steve and I, we've been hitting all our marks. I mean,
Well, to be determined here. It's early. It's early in the podcast.
I feel like it's for the two of us, it's been our best work yet. And I feel like the producers have been really letting us down today, across the board. Just really letting us down. This is such a dumb thing to do
sometimes
because
the
they're the ones that
forgets who does the editing.
They're the ones who do all the post editing. So
Well, let's go into something.
don't believe what you see.
Let's go into something fun that David's not going to like. Oh, wait,
yes,
he's excited.
he is.
Okay, he's going to like it. Well, I saw.
I'll just be taking these.
Well, I don't know if you're going to like all these ones. Because
they're all good.
honestly, I wasn't like, so the Halloween candy's coming out. And I know that the pumpkin, there's a bit, is there a disagreement on the pumpkin being the best Reese's
Among
available?
who? Egg is better.
Amongst us.
I don't have the good enough taste buds to tell you the difference. But my son, I think, says the egg is better.
Easter egg is better than the pumpkin, but the pumpkin's better than a regular Reese's.
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
John said it well. I would agree with that.
Okay.
Now, they have been making some changes to the pumpkin, so we'll see.
Is it better
it's
than
a little bit of a
double
different
stuffed,
shape
though?
because if you notice
big
on the
cups? Yeah. Those
on the
things are good.
picture, it's a little bit more of an egg shape now.
Hold it to the camera.
I was showing it to John. We can get in there. So we'll see.
All right.
Here.
What are we seeing?
We're gonna try the traditional pumpkin.
Can we also taste?
We can we can taste it too, and then we can taste a white pumpkin.
What is it,
And
though?
then I have it's called a Franken cup,
A Franken cup.
which just means they added some green dye to it. Okay,
That sounds gross.
so let's start with the traditional one.
What's our goal for
should've
the
brought-
day? Like, are we trying to decide
We're
which
gonna
is
decide
better,
which
just-
one is the best
And by taste.
by taste.
Okay.
Yeah, by taste. So
I can already tell you.
I'm gonna
what's
describe
happen.
this one. Does not look anything like the package. So here's the picture on the package. It looks not very appetizing. I'm not sure if you can see this right here from the
How
get-go.
long have these been in your bag?
I just bought them yesterday.
Where'd you get them?
I got it at Kroger.
All right. Which Kroger?
It cuts very easily. Can you
How did
hear
you
this?
know to cut it with the side of the?
Can you hear this when I cut it?
That was really smart.
Be quiet for a second. Listen. I didn't mean to be
You
rude
do,
to you.
you do.
God, sorry. Oh, you couldn't really hear it.
didn't hear anything.
You couldn't really hear with that
I
one.
made the noise. You're good.
Okay. Good. I won't touch your part. You take whichever one you want.
This looks like a.
Is it kind of
Has it been
soft?
sitting? Has it been sitting in your car?
It has. I came
That's
here
what
from.
that's saying. That's what has happened. It's sticky.
I noticed how you made sure you got the centerpiece, which was the big one.
I wasn't. How did I make sure of that? I told you
Like-
to pick whatever one you want. I don't want to get the chocolate all over my hands, so I'm going for the whole thing.
It's delicious.
I mean, it's a Reese's, so it's going to be good.
I mean, that is what it is.
I don't know. The middle is really good. I got a ton of.
I can just tell you that's what's going to win right now.
I got a ton of peanut butter.
You think that's going to win?
I've had the white chocolate before. I'm not a huge fan.
Based on what I just ate, I would say a double
John,
stuffed cup is better.
Double stuffed cup.
The big cups are because and the ones that they put stuff in.
Really.
That depends for me. Like, I don't like the pretzel.
Okay. This one
The one
was
where
in
they
my
put
car
Reese's
as well,
Pieces
but
in
look
it?
at this
That's
one.
the one.
Look at
That's
this
good.
one right here. Looks much better. But I am a little disappointed. There are no faces on this. Why are they showing?
I don't even think that looks any different than the one we just ate.
It
It's just
looks
a different color.
No, it was the other one was not formed correctly, but I don't know why I'm showing that to you, John.
I don't care how it looks.
Okay, I'm cutting it quickly here. All right.
I think if
gotta
I
take
was
it.
watching this podcast, I'd have tuned out by now.
Probably.
I'd
Grab
be
a-
like, I'm going to the
That's
store
the
to get some
podcast.
Reese's.
Grab a bite there.
I'm taking that one because it's the biggest one.
Okay. John.
See
I'm
if I
just
can
saying,
actually get
this
off the
one
sun.
held together
Now,
a
this is
lot
not
better.
white chocolate, is it?
What is this?
It
Yeah,
says
it's just-
no. It says it's cream.
Wait. Where do you see that? Oh, white cream and peanut butter. Oh, good eye, David.
I mean, it's the inside's great.
It's still got peanut butter. And,
You're missing
and-
the chocolate peanut butter amazingness. You know,
Do they sell their peanut butter in a jar?
I think they do.
I think I've seen it somewhere.
Yes, they do.
I want that.
That's very good. I still like the white chocolate one. But
I mean, I wouldn't-
as David
I wouldn't say
said,
no to this.
it's probably not white chocolate because it says white cream on it.
Not allowed to call it white chocolate.
Yeah,
So-
no, it's good.
Okay, so here's the Franken cup. So we can get it on camera here. This one is basically just your average Reese's cup, but the bottom section of it is green,
Is that from mold?
which makes it a Frankenstein cup.
Is this just what?
They just add green.
When they
problem
sit in the
solved.
warehouse for too long and they turn green, they just
turn
call
it, yeah.
Frankenstein. Yeah.
Okay, now see these ones here? Now these ones also look a little smashed. I'm gonna blame it on the warehouse.
Well, which Kroger did you go to?
Austin Landing.
Oh, they should have the good
So
stuff
this one,
there.
right from the get-go, is a little bit thicker feeling.
Is
little harder
this
to-
is this essentially just a regular cup that has green
Um,
coloring in
So,
it?
well, let's
what I'm
read the
thinking.
package here. If it gives us, it just says, okay.
Extra spooky.
It says green colored cream. So it might be the same as the white cream, except green.
green cream.
Green colored cream.
Does a regular cup have any kind of cream in it though?
No. No, this one is milk chocolate and peanut butter. So go ahead and, you want to take apart?
I want that part.
Okay, take it. Go ahead, take whichever section you'd like.
This is the section I'd like.
Okay. Then I'm gonna
Oh, I see it. They did.
I'm gonna
here.
throw it to Matt.
I cannot eat one.
Well, never mind.
today.
He's allergic.
I don't really want to eat this.
Why?
The problem is
It's
your
just
eyes
disappointing.
tell you something's going to be minty about this, and so you're expecting there to be something minty.
Yeah.
The idea of mint and peanut butter
Let's
does
show.
not.
We can
No.
show. We can try to show the camera here. The bottom is a minty green.
I don't. I mean, it's fine because it's got peanut butter and chocolate.
I
so
actually
it's
not
don't
that
want to
great.
finish this. Like it's not.
It's not that great. But would you say that's the same color there? I mean, I feel like it's definitely lighter, probably because of the cream. Yeah, don't go for the Franken cup. It's disappointing. Leave our-
Do y'all remember when they came out with like all the like colored like ketchup and stuff?
Yes, that was disgusting.
It was
the
the-
purple ketchup.
Purple ketchup, the grossest thing ever. Like, why would you do that?
I don't remember this at all.
The purple ketchup.
It was like probably mid 2000s. Like,
I want to apologize now for any headphone users listening. That was probably extremely weird to hear. You guys just chewing on Reese's.
There's some people who like that
I
sound.
had to take my
ASMR.
Yeah.
It got weird.
Right. Okay.
It gets weird.
So, moving on.
Yeah, we need to move
Clear
on.
clear winner was the original.
So this is just a
Just
great
the-
example of if it's good, you don't ruin it, right? If you
Right.
you don't need to prove things that are
It's
perfect.
similar to the Indiana Jones trilogy. Why'd you mess with it?
Why don't mess with it?
Is
Don't
there
mess
a
with Star Wars?
Is there a better?
Star Wars has only gotten better.
Is there a better candy bar
Shut your mouth.
franchise though than Reese's?
Like overall franchise?
Yeah. Like I know some people might argue there's a better candy bar out there. I don't know what
Right.
it would be.
No, I would say because a Reese's and all of its iterations are
one.
still
I
good.
mean,
What are you gonna say? Snickers?
no.
Good.
I mean,
Snickers just says Snickers,
just
right? Like-
personally, there's one that I like better.
What is it?
A Score.
I don't think I've ever.
Becca
had a
loves Score, too.
It's
Like-
it's kind of like it's a toffee. So if you're into toffee,
you like
candy.
my dentist bills.
I've never had a cavity, so
No, I don't.
it hasn't
I
affected
don't-
me.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I don't eat them very often
All
either.
right.
Rarely.
People
Okay.
where I
Anyway,
come from don't
I
have
can't believe it's
cavities.
better than Reese's though.
You have to have teeth to get cavities.
I mean,
wooden teeth.
so yeah, I was thinking about your question from last week. About
really? Okay.
Why don't teeth heal themselves?
Yeah.
And I think part of it is they're in the same family as nails,
Uh-huh.
right? Because your nails,
It's just like calcified. Like
right?
it's-
Your nails don't heal themselves either.
Well, they
they
continue
keep
to
growing.
grow.
So that'd be awesome if your teeth like just kept growing like your
Wouldn't it?
hair.
Yeah.
That would
And you had,
not
like,
be. I don't know if that would
teeth
be
cuts.
awesome.
Right. So you got
that does happen to squirrels,
teeth.
and mice. I think
Their teeth don't stop growing.
that's why they're always chewing on stuff.
I have no idea. So teeth,
Matt's gonna
nails,
Google it for
and
us.
antlers.
That's why they have to chew. They're always chewing on.
What about ducks?
Do they have
Like
teeth?
domesticated ducks. Do they have teeth?
I don't know. Why don't you?
We
you
can find out.
You can find out for sure.
All right.
I thought you were gonna say something about a deeper question that I asked. Yeah, Matt has an update on us.
So, their 4 front teeth do keep on growing.
Who's ducks?
No, squirrels.
Squirrel. Squirrel. Okay. Now everyone was waiting for that answer.
Good to know.
Yes.
All right.
So
Now
sermon
our ears keep growing.
and nose, right?
I don't know about nose, probably.
I don't know. Some old people have huge noses. I bet they didn't start out that way.
Steve, which old people are you specifically talking about? And do they go to our church? And-
Joe Biden. I don't know. He doesn't have a huge nose, I don't think.
Who's got a bigger nose, Biden
What
or
if-
Trump?
what if-
I would have to think Trump
I think
does,
Trump
but I don't
probably
know.
what
does,
if
right?
that's why,
There's Pinocchio references there.
I'm like
May-
really
maybe
biting my
this
tongue
is-
to not go down the
maybe this
Pinocchio
is
road.
why the older you get, the more like you become eventually at like a fall risk, like because you're
Because
getting
your
off
nose?
balance, your nose is pulling you. know.
Okay, now we're taking this way
No,
too
but
far.
that's why your ears
Your
keep
ears are
growing
bound to
to
counter
balance
it
it out. So you have a tripod
Yeah,
of
you just
balance.
Well, your ears actually help you with your balance too. Your inner ear, and your
And your
ear,
whiskers.
Your ear has 3 bones in it. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Pretty strange.
Can you name them?
The ear bone and the other ear bone.
They're
and the
really
third ear
hard
bone.
Like one of them is a hammer, right?
Yeah. I just
your ear
literally
bone.
last night. So we've been doing this devotional with our kids. It's like a science devotional.
That's a weird devotional if you're talking about ear bones.
It was, and it talked about ear bones. So it was talking about hearing and doing.
ear bones connected to the.
You know, it's always loosely
ear bone.
They always kind of like it's a Lou Giglio one, so I always think they stretch the science too much to match up with the Bible. The Bible's not a science book.
Does he
Hey,
really
if you
go by Lou Giglio?
Isn't it
who else?
Louis?
Isn't he Louis?
Okay, whatever he goes by.
Formerly, it should
Louis?
be like Louis. Louis.
Okay, well, anyway, you talked about Amos on.
Amos.
There you go, Amos on Sunday, and
I love that. Amos.
and
Did you know that Amos backwards
gonna-
is Soma? There's like
yes, I did.
there's a whole group of churches that are called Soma.
yeah.
Because of that?
I don't think that's why. No.
Anyway.
It's just kind of an interesting.
And you also kept your sermon to, we got out at church on time this Sunday.
I was trying to make sure we didn't do that, but
You were trying to
I
make us go
noticed
over.
this that when I preach a short sermon in the
John-
next service, John extends the singing time.
We're all like, oh my gosh.
It's
we
like
got
his
out.
way
We
of
got out
making sure
on
I
time.
don't extend the sermon.
yep.
Yeah. Well, you do. You do add more or tweak things as the sermon goes
Well,
on.
I usually leave things out. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I usually leave things out that
insider
I'm not
information?
sure they'll fit, and then later on I add them in.
Okay. So I did have a question about prophets here. I feel like it's appropriate. I don't know how much. I saw the questions. I'm like, we may not have to talk a ton about the questions, but we may. But here,
Gross profit
Yep.
minus expenses and overhead
Yeah.
equals net profit.
yeah.
How does that work with us being a not-for-profit?
So how did like in today's day, if you want to get the word out about something, you might go to Twitter, which is now, is it called X now?
X.
Okay. You might go to
But
Twitter.
it's still twitter.com.
You might.
I get emails from them that says X, formerly Twitter. So
Yeah.
you might as well still be Twitter.
Why did they even change it?
This is not.
And what does it mean?
It's not my point here.
Can we get Elon Musk on the podcast?
That would be awesome.
Elon, join us.
If you're one of the 51 people who watches every week, we would love to have you on.
He's not watching right now.
But maybe if we say Elon Musk enough,
It'll trip the algorithm.
yeah, and he'll want to know why we're talking about Elon Musk so much.
Yeah. Well, I was not trying to get us off on a rabbit trail here, but so basically what I'm talking about is communication.
I am
plot.
trying to keep us on the rabbit trail.
That is the plot
Okay. Well, let's not talk about anything the rest of the day. We just chat to each other. This might be why we only have 51 people who watch regularly. I'm the only one who's trying
Poor
to
Steve. He
talk about
tries
something.
so hard to keep us on track.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll just get to my question. How did the prophets get their word out? So we have it in the Bible, okay, and we can read it today. But there was no written word of it that was, widely passed out to the people during that day. So my question is, how did the prophets? Where was that met? Who was the intended audience of that message that they originally wrote?
So I think most of what they did was sermons,
Yeah.
right? Some was writing, but someone would have written down their sermons, and then it would have spread that way. I mean, they could write back then. They had language,
No,
and
I
they wrote on scrolls and stuff.
I get that.
So maybe the best way to answer that is
Yeah.
Daniel.
I'm just trying to say I'm more of my idea
What
here.
do you want me to answer it or not?
Well, no, I'm just saying I'm trying to. You're answering it, but I'm trying to give you a little context of what I was thinking. But because back then they didn't have the means of communication that we do today, so I'm trying to contextualize it a little bit for everyone.
Yeah. So in Daniel,
Yeah.
he talks about the fact that he was reading the prophet Jeremiah.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a very short span of time, like less than 100 years from Jeremiah to Daniel. In fact, they may have even been alive at the same time. So pretty quickly, Jeremiah's writings and preachings were spreading, and so much so that Daniel, who is in Babylon, is reading what Jeremiah wrote and said, even though Jeremiah was in Jerusalem. So we know that within a generation, the prophets were spreading their word around.
Yeah.
So there would have been scrolls that would have been distributed. So some of it would have been word of mouth, some of it would have been in scrolls, those kinds of things. My guess is that most of them wrote down their sermons, and then that would get passed around.
Okay. Good. I thought that was. As I was listening to your message, you just. It's like I wonder if other people wonder that kind of thing too. I mean, that's what. Once again, that's what is good about Bibles that have like a study Bible that has an intro in it that will tell you who the intended audience is when it was written. They get a lot of extra details like that. But when you read it, you oftentimes read it through your own perspective of like, oh, who is this written to? So, okay. So questions about the sermon. And I think this is one of this question is one that many people ask, and many people who aren't Christians would definitely ask, and one that has come up a lot in my life, just talking to people, is why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. So we talked on Sunday about the fact that life is full of trouble, right?
Yeah.
And so why is that? I think the best answer to that is a question, right? And my question to anybody who asks me that back up a little bit.
Yeah.
I've said this before. I will often answer a question like that by saying, do you want me to answer this question with the truth or with what makes you feel good?
What makes me feel good?
Okay, so so the truth is where we want to go. So my question would be, why does it matter? Right?
Because I think, I'm not going to speak for myself on this.
No, you should speak for yourself.
Well, I want to speak in... Yeah. So, okay, why does it matter? Because we might look at God and say, well, God isn't fair.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
like, I mean, I wouldn't say that because I understand the question myself and have answered the question many times. But I think that's why it is important, is because you're like, well, this person is good, but there's bad things are still happening to them. Like, why does that happen? So when I used to work at a much larger church, one of my duties was to like answer the phone when anyone from the outside of the church would call, and they'd ask any question they wanted. And one day someone called and said, I had a friend and their baby died. Why did God do that? Like that's kind of the same thing of like this innocent baby who, never had a chance to do anything good or bad, and it did not survive. Like, I think that's like an example of that, the deep rooted sense of that question.
Yeah. So the question is a question of God's fairness.
Yeah.
So, so the question is then therefore assuming that good people deserve to have good things happen to them.
Right.
And that good people do not deserve to have bad things happen to them.
Yeah, and maybe bad people deserve bad things to happen to them.
Okay, sure. So the question is presupposing that there is a standard of good and bad,
right?
Both for what happens and for what people are,
which is in a sense a case for a creator, because if there's good and bad, then there has to be a sense of fairness within that.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't even necessarily have to go that far. I would just simply say, well, who determines what's good and what's bad?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
No, I'm asking who does.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't believe that a God exists, then it is what the mass of people who are making that determination.
Mm-hmm. But see, the thing is
this based on culture.
This question is holding God to that standard.
Right.
So how do you hold someone to a standard if that person is the arbiter of that standard?
Sure.
Right? So the question in and of itself is a little bit of a fail, because somewhere there has to be an arbiter of what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
And whatever or whoever that arbiter is that determines what is good and what is bad cannot be held to that standard, because it is the standard. Mm-hmm. And so if God is the standard of right and wrong, then God cannot do wrong. He can only do right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that.
And where is the line of when you cross over from good to bad or bad to good?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's drawing that line?
Yeah, and that's where it all comes back to, is our understanding of who sets up the box in which we understand this, right? The framework. And if the framework is that God is beholden to our sense of justice, it's easy for us to say, how could a good God do a bad thing or allow a bad thing? Mm-hmm. But if you look at it from the God who set the framework, there is no bad thing that he does. Even the things we dislike are in his framework just. And I think one of the hard things for us is we like to look at things in terms of fairness or equity or in even good and bad we define by pleasurable or discomfort. And the reality is God is holy. So I would never like to say the phrase God is fair. That's not an expectation I have on God. He is just, he is holy, and he is merciful, right? And so we love to like say, how could God let this bad thing happen, and never once give him credit for all the mercies we've experienced. And the reality is, part of one of the things we believe as Christians is that all of us are wicked. All of us have sinned. And because of that, all of us deserve like the wrath of God. But out of his mercy, we don't today experience the fullness of that yet. Yeah. But we never want to give God the credit for that. We always want to just say, why is the bad stuff happening to us? And it's like, man, that is just a fraction of what we are owed,
Yeah. So having dismantled the philosophical underpinnings of the question, let's actually answer the question. So, the second question is, after you say, okay, so we've established that the person asking the question has this assumption that there is a standard of justice. There's right and there's wrong, there is good and there is bad, and people should be held accountable for what they do, right? So now the next question is then, okay, so if you're saying that good people do not deserve to have bad things happen to them, they should only have good things happen to them, then the converse is also true, which is that bad people should have bad things happen to them, right? So then are you comfortable with receiving bad consequences immediately every time you do something bad? Like every time you think a hateful thought about someone, maybe you don't say it even, but you just think it.
Well, we tend to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. So you know what I mean?
Right, but that's what this question does.
Yeah.
This question it's almost always asked from the perspective of, I'm the good person and bad things are happening to me, and that's not fair. But the reality is that when bad things happen to those people, they very rarely say, well, I deserve this, right? I mean, I don't. I often look at it and say, well, I don't deserve that, but in reality I do. All that to say, ultimately, though, we have this really bad standard of what's good and what's bad. So we'll go back to your example, a baby who dies. And this is where we get into that point of, do you want to hear the truth or do you want to hear what makes you feel
Yeah.
good? Because what I'm about to say is not necessarily going to make you feel good.
Yeah.
But here's the truth. What is better for that baby? Is it better for that baby to grow up and, go through life here in this broken world where bad things happen? Or is it better for that baby to be escorted immediately into the presence of God and enjoy eternity forever in the perfect presence of God? Which is better?
Option
B.
There you
Option
go.
B is better.
Couldn't remember which one we said first.
But we don't like that answer.
Yeah.
And then immediately the response to that would be, well, yeah, so maybe that's better for the baby.
Yeah.
But it's not better for me. But that wasn't the question. The question was, why did a bad thing happen to this good baby?
Yeah.
Well, a bad thing didn't happen to this good baby. A bad thing happened to us because we lost this good baby.
Yeah.
Right? But a bad thing did not happen to this baby. And so this causes us to rethink completely what we consider good and what we consider bad. Because not everything we think is good, and not everything that we think is bad. And not everything we do is good, even though we think it is.
Yeah.
And often the things we do are bad, even though we don't think they are. And even beyond all that, now we have to mix into this question the question of time. Should bad be repaid for bad immediately, or should it wait? And have that question with someone who doesn't believe in the death penalty. Right? So I don't believe in the death penalty, but why do bad things happen to good people? Well, okay, you want bad things to happen to bad people, but you don't believe in the death penalty. You don't believe in life for life because you believe in mercy. And mercy says time has to sit in here between the doing of the deed and the payment for the deed.
Right.
Well, sometimes maybe the good comes later when you do good things. And the reality is, for a truly good person, which doesn't really exist other than Jesus, but for a truly good person, maybe the good that is going to happen to them is going to happen on the other side of the grave. But we have to get to the point where we understand that death is not the worst thing that can happen to a person. In fact, for a person who is a truly good person, right, who is, a follower of Jesus, who has the righteousness of Jesus, death is actually one of the best things that can happen to them. So, all right.
Yeah.
Enough time on that.
And I think that, this is, doesn't need to be said, but I would like to say it anyway, is that in a sense of someone coming to you and asking that question with a, real world harm that happened to them or a loved one, it's not always appropriate to use logic in the beginning, right?
That's why I lead with that question.
Yeah, right. I think that's smart.
Yeah.
But I think that, like in the case of the person whose baby passed away, first thing I did is, just express condolences.
You know what,
and,
though?
and sorrow
There's a
for
difference.
that loss.
The situation you're talking about,
Yeah.
I have never in my life, and I've been with a lot of grieving people, I've never in my life had someone who's in grief like that ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
They simply say, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Right? They're not looking for this gotcha. That question, it is a logical question. It is
Why would God do this?
Right. They think it's a philosophical gotcha question. So I think the two situations are a little bit different.
They are. Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So
And I always, in that sense of at what point do you become a bad person? That one is very much left up to we don't really know where that line would even be drawn for someone, because how much bad do you do to become a bad person? And does that build up over time?
Yeah. How bad do you have to be to deserve bad thing, right? From that person's perspective.
Yeah.
How bad, because all of us can go, yeah, Adolf Hitler was horrible, right?
Right.
Okay, great. We recognize he deserved bad things. We all agree on that. But I would never say that the bad I have done deserves.
It's messy. It's a
Yeah.
very messy question when you start asking questions like that.
at risk of offending a whole lot of people,
Okay.
just point out that Adolf Hitler actually also had people who loved him,
Yeah.
Right.
who thought he was a good guy. That doesn't mean they were right, but there
Yeah.
were people who thought Adolf Hitler was a good guy.
Yeah.
So our ability to understand what is good and what is bad is just so flawed.
It is. It really is. It's messy.
And it's
life
much
is messy.
easier time removed from a situation, look back on something and go, oh yeah, that was clearly evil.
Yeah.
That was clearly wicked, But in the moment, people have really horrible judgment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, isn't it insensitive to tell people to have joy when they're suffering? Do you think that's insensitive?
Well, that's kind of where we were
Yeah.
just talking about that, right? What do you think?
But is it insensitive? I mean, yes, it could be insensitive. I think
Okay.
it depends on the situation. Like I feel like, something like I think like just what John said, time is probably a little bit of the determining factor of that, because I've always heard it said, and this is one of my favorite illustrations, that it's kind of like pain and suffering in life sometimes is like sitting in front of a railroad tracks watching a train go by. Is it you just see the cars in front of you, you don't see the beginning or the end, so you have no idea how long it's going to last. But if you could get in a helicopter and look over above, you could see the whole situation, and then once it's passed, you can better understand the whole situation. So sometimes time helps heal the wounds a little bit, and sometimes time helps us to better understand the
I
situation.
think there's also this element of joy is very much Christian joy that comes from the
Yeah.
Lord, right? A lot of it actually has to do with our trust in God.
Yeah.
And so the idea, because how can the same scripture, the same Bible that says, count it to joy, my brothers, when you go through various trials, also tells us to mourn with those who mourn, that there is a season for mourning and a season for weeping. How can those two things exist? It's because joy and mourning are not completely opposite of each other. Joy is, just speaking from my experience, like me and Becca went through a really hard thing a few years ago, and there was a lot of mourning and a lot of sorrow in that, but we never once lost the joy of the Lord, which was that we trusted that through the situation somehow there would be God would be glorified somehow through that, right? And even in those moments where it didn't make sense, we could fall back into that trust of this. And even though it stunk, it wasn't like it was like, oh yeah, I get to go through this today. This is great. No, it still stunk, and there were still awful moments. And I mean, there were days with weeping, but the joy of the Lord is something that kind of still was present through all that. And so I think there is this hard thing where we like to think of joy as just be happy. So like, if you go to someone who's suffering and you say, hey, just smile, just find joy, and dismiss the struggle and dismiss the challenge, that's very insensitive. Mm-hmm. But there is a way to say, hey, you are suffering, but here's the hope that God offers through this. Here is what you can, in this hard time, lean into. And it doesn't make the stinky parts of life any less bad.
Yeah.
It just helps you carry through those things to get to that place where on the other side you can look back and say, I saw God all these different ways.
Yeah. And sorry if I
No,
continue
go
on.
ahead.
Okay, so and also I've been in situations where I've had a phone call about someone going through something really tough situation, and at the time it felt more appropriate to say, well, maybe there's a lesson to be learned from this. Maybe there's you don't know what God is going to teach you through this moment, so there's joy in this suffering because God is going to use this for something good in your life. Mm-hmm. So I think it's somewhat kind of like depends on the situation. If it's an instance like what John was talking about, because I know his story and his life, like, yeah, I wouldn't go to him at that moment and be like, John, you need to be joyful in this. No, I would be like, that stinks right now. I'm your friend. How can I would love to be able to help you, in some way, because I have a relationship with
Right.
you and I'm friends with you and I knew the situation. But later in life, we could sit down and be like, look back at that situation and talk about how God saw you through that and the positives that come out of it, and then the help and comfort you can give to someone else that may go through the same thing that you faced.
And it's crazy too. Like Becca and I have conversations regularly now where we talk about how like in those moments we didn't see the future. It just seemed bleak. But today we look back and say, wow, it's really cool how that worked. It's really cool that it played out the way it played out. In the moment, we couldn't see that. We just had to trust God was working something out, right? But now I get to look back, and what's changed is it actually emboldens our faith to continue to, when God brings you through something challenging, it's a lot easier to go into the next challenging thing because your confidence, faith and confidence are very related. And so your confidence in the Lord is emboldened and increased because of what he's already brought you through.
Yeah.
I think part of the difficulty is when you say, there's a difference between going in and saying to somebody, well, you need to have joy.
Yeah.
Right? Versus pointing them to joy.
Yeah.
Right? And I would say, if someone's having a hard time, it may seem a bit insensitive to just say, well, you should have joy, because that's not very helpful.
Yeah.
But I would say it's unloving to not point them to joy.
Oh, yeah.
So if I were to enter a situation where someone is suffering for whatever reason, I am there to give them joy. That is why I'm there. Yeah. And if I don't point them in that direction, then I'm being unloving. And so I think, we need to be sensitive. We need to be kind. We need to mourn with those who mourn. We need to comfort those who need to be comforted. All of that is true. But in all of that, if we're not pointing them to joy, it's meaningless. It's that the resurrection is the hope of joy.
Yep.
And Paul said, if the resurrection is not true, then we are the most miserable of all. And I think sometimes because we want to, be empathetic and mourn and comfort and all that stuff, we make ourselves more miserable. Like if I go into somebody and they're in this dark spot and they're like, oh, there's no hope. And I say, yeah, I get it. There's no hope. Why even go? Yeah. Right? So I think that we have to figure out how to point them towards joy. But I think that if I have to choose between being perceived as insensitive and being actually unloving, I'm going to choose to be perceived as insensitive so that I can be truly loving, which is I'll point to joy even if maybe they don't want that. Because there are times when people want to wallow in the mud.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the worst thing I can do is say, yeah, that mud is beautiful. Keep wallowing.
Well, and sometimes it changes too, like dealing with Christians who are going through a hard thing, and it's I think a lot easier than that to be like, I know that you may not feel it right now and see it in the immediate of your life, but I know about this future hope. I know versus dealing with somebody who is in that place where it's life is awful. I don't believe in a God, but maybe I do a little bit. So how can God let this happen to me? In that person, that's a much different conversation, and that person has never even received maybe the spark of that hope.
Right. Yeah. As Paul said in 1 Thessalonians, we do not mourn as those who have no hope.
Yep.
Right.
So nothing is more frustrating than when Christians mourn as those who have no hope.
It's hard too. Sometimes people are mourning about things that they could, there is things, just horrible things that happen to people, right? But sometimes the things that we are upset about and that are making our lives miserable are the results and the consequences of our own behaviors and our own actions. And that's the worst thing I could ever do is to encourage your mourning for something that you have the power to fix and improve in your life.
Yeah.
Well, we also, as humans, tend to, when things aren't going our way, or we see other people who have more than we have, it's easy to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer of like, oh, if I only had this, or if I, so I think it's, in a sense, it's easy to be someone who sees bad things when they aren't necessarily there. It's maybe the human condition that we live in. So, I think we have to regularly remind ourselves of all the good thing that God does. And David, I think you do a good job with this of being thankful, just talking about being grateful for the things that we have. And being grateful is the antidote for being ungrateful, and I think that helps put our lives in perspective when we're like, hey, I actually have a lot of things to be thankful. And when things feel really bad and I start counting all the ways that God has blessed me, it helps. It's
crazy how much gratitude I have for the concept of gratitude, because it changes your perspective in every area of your life. And, I think that's why you bring it up so often, is because if this is the one thing you can begin to practice, I think more than almost any other practice, you will start to see your attitude and your perspective change rapidly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can say with like 99% confidence that the most miserable people I know across the board are the ones who are not grateful for anything. Mm-hmm. Yep. And the more grateful people are, the more joy they exhibit. And, you look at the two joy and suffering passages that are the most common in the Bible are James 1 and Philippians 4, right? And look at the key word in both of those is either every or all. Yeah. Right. I've learned to be content in what situations? Yeah. All situations. Right. And I, count it joy when you endure what kind of trials and tribulations? Yeah. All. Yeah. So I just think, There it is. And no matter where you're at, gratitude.
Yeah, those are great verses when you're going through a tough time.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right.
All right, I got another question here.
You
Good
do?
discussion. Yes. Is it a sin to not have joy in the middle of suffering? So when something bad is happening,
It's kind of a setup, wasn't it?
it is a setup.
That first question led right into this one.
It did.
Or that second one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So is it a sin? Is it wrong to not have joy? Are you looking for an answer? I mean, it kind of
really interesting question.
It is a really interesting question, and it kind of is because you're kind of disobeying God in that sense.
It immediately brings up our questions, our understanding of what sin is, right?
Yeah.
Is sin purely positive actions that we do, or is sin a state of existence?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes to both, right? There is this understanding of sin and so there is sin that affects our lives that is the consequence of, and immediately that we have to, I think, understand what sin is to even answer that.
Yeah. So how does this tie into the message? Can you give us that tie-in together?
Sure. So a couple quick thoughts though.
Yeah.
There's an old quote that floats around: partial obedience is disobedience, which is, a true statement. In James,
Like when you tell your kids to clean up the room and they shove everything under their bed.
right? Yes, yeah. James said something similar. If you keep the whole law and yet offend at one point, you're guilty of all.
Yeah.
So, that's important here, and that to intentionally not have joy, right? To choose to not be joyful. That's disobeying God. So there you have it. So how that ties into the sermon, we talked about joy. The whole sermon was about joy. And it was kind of a practical thing of, where do you find joy in Jesus and how do you find joy in Jesus? But, some of the key points there were we took from the wedding at Cana when Mary says to the servants, do whatever he tells you.
Yeah.
If the servants hadn't done what Jesus told them, the miracle wouldn't have happened. I mean, Jesus would have done it a different way because he was going to do it, right? And they were always going to obey. But if they don't, that's the impetus for the miracle. And obedience is that important. And when we're not obeying, we're not going to experience joy. And so you end up in like that death spiral of I'm choosing to not have joy. So think about what are the attitudes.
I'm choosing to not listen to what God has told me to do.
I'm going to choose bitterness.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to choose anger.
But how do you get someone to realize that they're choosing bitterness?
You say, you're choosing bitterness.
Calling someone out is not always the proper strategy. I mean, I think that can't work. But helping someone who is like asking questions and things like that will help them to see that versus just
I think
you're choosing bitterness.
Yeah, there's a way to help people.
I'm not saying you were saying it that way.
You can help people see.
I kind of am.
Okay.
You can help them see their behavior and then the fruit of that behavior, right? And say, so they go, I don't know why every relationship in my life ends up this way. And then you can say, well, your actions in each of these areas are clearly going to result in that, right? And then you could even say, that's because you're a bitter person. That's because you are bringing, there is a strategy to that to help them kind of see it. I think if you start a conversation with just, hey, you're a bitter person and that's why your life stinks, people immediately get defensive.
Do you think people do that?
You have to say that.
Yeah. Do you think people do that?
Do what?
Do you think friends come to each other and help call each other
out of the blue?
Well, not out of the blue, but do you think that people do
Real
friends sit down and have tough conversations with people?
Absolutely,
because we're in a time where people have the least amount of friends that they've ever had.
Because we cut.
Yeah.
Society
people
says to
just
cut
have
people
less
off.
friends and less people to help call them out on things than has ever been.
I'm biting my tongue to not tell you it's fewer.
Fewer. I'm sorry. Fewer. They have fewer friends.
Steve, as your friend, I need to confront you about something.
So you've been around me long enough, and John has too, to know that generally I'm going to guide a conversation like that using questions.
Yeah.
Right. I very rarely am going to come to somebody and be like, you are doing this, but I'm probably going to ask questions and try to guide you to that. And then at some point say, well, do you think it might be, right?
Yeah.
But I absolutely think there are times, and I've had this conversation with people where you say to someone, you just simply have to say, you know what, I see this. And I think here's where you have to be cautious about how you do it, right? You don't want to just be like, you are this or you're doing this, but I perceive this, I see this, I'm observing this, I've noticed this. Do you think it could be, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you are a friend, you have to do that. I think the Bible tells us to do that.
Yeah.
And I know modern sensibility says don't.
Right.
Right.
I think, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel like most friends, like maybe really, really close friends, but most friends try to avoid difficult conversations,
we live
conversations.
in an era of where we have said any discomfort equals either harm or offense.
Right.
And so it's now very hard to even approach someone with a difficult conversation because you don't want to offend them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a huge loss for us culturally, societally, and relationally. But I would hope, right, that, and I've had to have conversations with friends before, and I've actually been on the other end of that, right? And the thing
that reminds me, we have to talk after
we all need to talk to Matt.
We got to talk to Matt. But I would hope that I have demonstrated to that person, like to my friend, that I genuinely care about them. I genuinely I love them, and so I want them to succeed, and I'm on their team. And it's out of that same side that I'm having to bring this up, and it's hard to do. I think for guys too, this is really hard too, because we don't like to talk about the fact that we love each other, right? But it has to come from that standpoint of, that I am actually for you, and that's why I'm saying this. But if all my friendships are superficial and we don't get past, hey, how was the game? Yeah, it's very hard to get to that place.
Yeah. You need to have people in your life who will say hard things to you.
Yeah, you definitely do.
Yeah.
So that is
not the direction this.
No.
But it's a good direction.
It is, and I was preparing. Yeah. I'm speaking in the youth group this Sunday, and I actually typed into ChatGPT, how do you talk to a friend about something difficult? Because it's kind of like a bit of the topic that we were going through.
So you're going to let the Antichrist write your...
I'm not, but I was just curious what it might say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I use ChatGPT for my sermon prep every week.
I know that
I think if people knew how much ChatGPT is used,
but it gives some good advice. What I really liked is the like, it kind of summed it up at the end. I'm just going to read this. Remember, the difficult conversations are a natural part of any friendship, and addressing issues openly and honestly can lead to a stronger, more resilient relationship. And I'm like, that's so true. Like, it's really hard. I think that kind of like sums up this whole conversation here of, like, it's difficult, it's hard, but it is 100% worth it. There's no doubt that if you care about that person, you want to see them become a better person.
Yep. Good. Is that it?
That is all. So thank you for spending some time with us and growing together on this Greenhouse podcast. Right. Have a great rest of your day.
Yep. And we need to go talk.
Okay, let's talk.
I'm so mad right now.